My name is Tiara Andrews, and I will be presenting my final project, Humanities in My Life, and the title of my project is called It's Not All About the Humans. So, what is humanities? Humanities is said to be the creative expression of men and women around the world. What is required of us to be fully human? When we think about being fully human, we think about earlier in the semester where we started to learn about becoming that infinite person, becoming that infinite man, becoming that infinite person. And the infinite person basically just excels in various multiple areas in life, whether it be science, mathematics, love, writing, poetry, just has an all around knowledge of all aspects and all subjects and things in life. And another thing that I would say requires us to be fully human is basically emotion, having love, having sympathy, being able to love, being able to cry. That's required of us to be fully human. I think emotion is one of the main things required of us to be fully human. One with emotion is just would be a cruel person. It wouldn't be able to understand others and other religions and how other people were raised. So um, that's another thing that is required of us to be fully human. Understanding that everyone is different and treating everyone like you want to be treated. Humanity's contribution to the following subjects. So, when we think of human nature, just ask yourself, what is in our human nature? Is human nature to cry? Is human nature to love? Is human nature to be sad? It's human nature to have emotion, as I mentioned in the previous post. And something that we're all taught at a very young age is that you have to treat people how you want to be treated. And I think that's instilled in everyone at a young age, and it starts to become our human nature. Although it's not seen often, but in your conscience somewhere, you know that you have to treat people how you want to be treated. It's in our human nature to have feelings. It's in our human nature to get upset. It's in our human nature to feel hate at times. But, this is just all qualities of human nature. And I think what sticks out the most is that, you have to treat people how you want to be treated. And understand others. Be willing to understand others and other people's background. Knowledge. I think knowledge is very important, and a way of obtaining knowledge is to keep learning on a daily basis. Try to learn something new every day and read as much as you can. And here I have a picture of Don Quixote, and this is actually one of the first novels written in the Western world. And I think that's very important to have a first novel, and reading is fundamental to gain knowledge. And I just thought it would be nice to add this. So you have Don Quixote, and which was again the first novel written in Western culture, in the Western world. I'm sorry. Then you have culture. Um, we talked a lot about culture throughout the semester. There's various cultures. I don't have them all listed here, but I would like to, you know, chime in on two different cultures. So, um, in the Chinese culture, Confucius is really, really heavy. And the number one rule in Confucius with the Chinese culture is that you have to respect your parents, honor thy parents. And I think everyone is taught that in any religion, in any culture, is respecting your parents. And another thing that stood out in the Chinese culture, Confucius and their family, is that the kids or the younger adults can only eat once all the adults have eaten. And I think that's very good to point out because, how I was raised, the kids would eat first during, like, this year for Thanksgiving. All the babies ate first, then the younger adults, and then the adults ate. That's how we were raised. So this is just a key point of highlighting and help me understand other cultures because it can be a shock to me. And I may eventually meet a friend or gain a close friend in the future who's of Chinese culture. So this has taught me like not to be shocked if I was to ever go into uh, a cultural environment full of, Chinese cultural environment, saying that, hey, the older people are eating before the babies and the kids. That doesn't make sense. Well, this humanities class has taught me that this is a part of the Chinese culture. Um, then you have African American culture, and I have a picture here of basically people dancing. Folk dance, folk stories is really, really prominent in the African American culture. More so during the time of injustice and slavery. You know, the African American culture would have folk stories, just folk songs, just basically elaborating on their struggles and, releasing inner stress and emotions. And folk dances, very passionate, very upbeat, and it tells a story in a way, in a sense. So I like to highlight that as well. How myths contribute to humanity. So we learned about a number of myths during the semester. I learned about a number of myths during the semester. And there's two myths that I just really wanted to highlight on, which was childhood myths and popular myths. So what does childhood myths teach children? And this is just a picture of Little Red Riding Hood. And if you think about some childhood myths instills values in children. It teaches children's values at a very young age. And it's simple values that can be understood, like, no talking to strangers and no letting strangers in the house. And, another thing, treating people how you want to be treated, and sharing is caring. And you see that a lot in childhood myths. Popular myths. What are some things this type of myth help us understand? So, when learning about popular myths this semester, a key thing that popular myths helps us understand is sayings. And those sayings can be what goes around comes around, or the grass is not greener on the other side. Surely when we were growing up, 5, 6 years old, no one ever knew what it means. Oh, the grass is not green on the other side. You don't really fully understand that meaning at the age 4 and 5. But as you grow up and you start reading myths or novels, you understand that the term "the grass is greener" is not green on the other side. It's just basically telling you that, hey, appreciate what you have and embrace what you have. And you may think something is better than what you have going on now, but it's really not. And that's not the case all the time. And what goes around comes around. It's just basically teaching us about karma. And it goes back to treating people how you want to be treated. What goes around comes around. You treat someone badly, you're bound to be treated badly back. You treat someone nice, you're bound to be treated nice back. And like I said, becoming an infinite person, becoming fully human, it all stems around from treating people how you want to be treated, having that emotion and having that, that conscience in the back of your head that, hey, I got to treat somebody like I want to be treated. And that's what this saying really elaborates on. What goes around comes around. What are some questions and issues that arose from the following? Antiquity. So this is a period before the Middle Ages, and before the Middle Ages, a medieval period was introduced. And this period was really considered like a dark period in its time. And another thing I wanted to highlight about the medieval time is that during this time, Goliards were introduced and was presented in the medieval times. And Goliards were basically a group of rebellious students, mainly young men training for priesthood, and they were basically encouraging others to enjoy themselves before entering a holy order. Like, hey, the saying, YOLO, you only live once. And this was basically happening during the time. YOLO wasn't a saying then, but as mentioned before, popular mythology has taught us sayings, you only live once. That saying can help us understand this time, medieval times, and how these Goliards were introduced, and these young men were just encouraging other young men that, hey, let's have fun before we enter these holy orders, or let's have sex before marriage, and let's do everything we're not going to be able to do once we become confined in this strict holy order. Middle Ages. So you have the Victorian area, and in this area, it was, as mentioned here, in the Middle Ages. And during the Victorian era, upper and middle class people started to decide that they were going to forget about their humble past and start living their idea of correctly. And their idea of correctly introduced gender roles and double standards and conspicuous consumptions. And, gender roles being, hey, the man is supposed to work, the wife is supposed to stay home, take care of home, take care of the kids. And then they had these double standards that was introduced in this era where men were allowed to have sex before marriage, but if a woman was to have sex before marriage, it was a big no-no, big no-no during this time. And then you had the conspicuous consumptions. And this is basically where economics played a big part. The women would show off their husband's net worth. Like, hey, my husband is wealthy. And they would do this by wearing very expensive attire and jewelry. Then you have modern world. During this time, new ways of staging was introduced. And Thornton Wilder, he introduced Our Town. And Our Town basically introduced a new way of staging. Thornton Wilder had a narrator on a stage, and this narrator would basically just give the audience a visual of what the stage was supposed to look like. And in this case, in Our Town, he gave the audience a visual description of a small town that took place during the story of Our Town. So the stage was completely empty. It wasn't full of actors or, props. It was completely empty, and this narrator would basically explain what's on the stage, give an audience a visual depiction of what's on the stage, how this small town is supposed to look like. And the audience at the time really understood it, which is really cool. So art. There's a lot of aspects of art that we learned, but to keep it short, one thing that we learned that was introduced about art was surrealism. And surrealism was introduced by Frida Kahlo and Salvador Dali. Theater. We learned a lot about theater as well, and one thing that stuck out to me was theater of alienation. And this was brought about by Bertolt Brecht. And Bertolt Brecht basically was theater of alienation. He basically thought that he believed that theater could bring about social change by presenting negative models. And that was that. Music. We learned a lot about music, whether it be jazz, blues. Here I highlight hip hop and rap. And a key thing to remember about hip hop is that it has a lot of rhythm. And rhythm is an alteration between stressed and unstressed beats, sounds. And rap is half spoken and half sung music. Dance. We learned a lot about dance, whether it be ballet, folk dance. Here I highlight folk dance, which is really seen a lot in the African American culture. Film. A world of critical viewing. We learned about this during the film section of humanities. And, just key things to remember about a world critical viewing is don't jump to conclusions. Ask yourself, what have I seen? What have I heard? Explore the context and speculate ideas. Consider the craft and technique, and consider the form. Musical stage. This is a period where Broadway was introduced. And a big play that we learned about during this time, Broadway, was Paul Joey in 1940. Timeline of lust. So, in classical myth, you have Gaius Patronus, and he basically warned us about lust. Then 1001 Nights was basically a collection of 400 tales. Medieval lust, this is Geoffrey Chaucer. He was a real secular of his time. We all know about Romeo and Juliet. Adultery is a period where, men were allowed to have mistress. And Humanities has impacted my life. It helps me embrace my family, appreciate my family and my loved ones. And here's a little video from me going home over Thanksgiving break. So, thank you.